Cue the music we don't have.
Oh,
Big church hymn.
yeah, right. All right, so this is the Holyish Life.
Can I have your attention, please?
That actually, there were two topics, so you take your pick. But we talked about how a kind of necessary component to being your own lifesaver was really learning to trust God. And then the other thing was, once you've made the decision and you're going to change something in your life for the better, how do you know what those next steps are and when to take them? So, dealer's choice, Lauren.
Whew, that's a tough one. Okay, I think the first topic is, well, here, let me start backwards. The second one I think is such a standalone topic. Like I said, there's so much information with that one that I think we should do a standalone episode just about that because it's very dynamic. So why don't we go with A? I choose A.
Trusting God. All right. So I struggle with this immensely still, like every day. And I have recently, I don't know if it's just the time I've spent in the Bible, or it's the last year and a half of sort of being forced into that trusting position, but I'm finding it easier every day. And it's almost like I almost feel like I'm on drugs sometimes. That's not a great way to say it.
Hi on
but
Jesus.
Yeah, never done drugs, but I feel like this is what it feels like. The little things just don't bother me, and I think it's because I'm like, he's got this. Whereas I used to be, it's sort of like discombobulating because I wake up and I'm like, what's going to happen today? Instead of like, I was like militaristic for years. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Militaristic about my schedule and what I was going to get done. And I was just kind of I'm pretty type B, but I had gotten so used to this very type A way of living that wasn't working out. Even, not necessarily while things were all exploding and, it's fiery chaos and crash. Even afterwards, just nothing was really happening in the right direction. And I don't know exactly when the switch flipped, but I feel like I took my hands off the wheel, and I don't know what's happening half the time. Like I said, when I wake up, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a great day, I think. What's happening? But it's a nice feeling. And so I don't have one specific thing I can point to, but I know that I know there's been a change, and I know Scripture, obviously reinforces that this works. Trust Him. Yeah.
I think too, you might have been in like fight or flight for so long of a period of time that's why like your sort of militant style of life felt like that was the things you could control.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And even though it might have been like internal fight or flight constantly, so you leaned on what you could, which was within your control, controlling the variables, right? And so when you finally got to a place where you didn't feel like you had to have such a tight grip on things, it allowed space for God to be like, hey, don't forget, I'm here, I can help, right? And I don't think that that's an easy place to get to. And I think people have to almost go through those periods of like extreme control and like choke holding on things, and coming out the other end of it, even just incremental, to allow space to put some trust in God.
Right. And then see that start to work.
Exactly.
A
and
little
then
bit.
Have positive reinforcement that was the right move.
Yeah.
And, I think it's your body physically and mentally, I'm sure is in a better place. Cortisol levels are down, you're sleeping, you can wake up and you don't feel like you have this huge burden and this huge, overwhelming day that you have to micromanage, or like you have to like wrestle to the
your
ground.
Shoulders.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And you can just breathe a sigh of relief of like, okay, I've got what I can and what I don't have, God has in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And I can imagine like what that must feel like from a stress perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am a relatively, I don't, I stress easily,
Mm-hmm.
but I can compartmentalize really well. And so I'm able to like turn it off.
Jealous.
Years of practice. And so I can turn it off so that I can sleep at night, right? But I do get high strung about things. And I know that feeling, that distinct feeling of I've done what I can with this, and now I have to just pray about it or turn it over to God because, like, I can't. This is beyond anything that I can muster up control over. Um, and I remember just being like, oh, wow, I feel 10 pounds lighter
Yeah.
because, but that is a big step. That is a huge thing to do. And I think we are not wired naturally for that. As
Mm-hmm.
much as we are, created in God's image, as much as we are, I think the social constructs of our world just don't allow for that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And so from birth, we aren't necessarily, some of us maybe have that blessing, but we aren't necessarily encouraged to be like, hey, the things that are too overwhelming for you, don't worry about it. Like, God's got you. Instead, it's, yeah, you should be worried about these things. Like, this is your burden to carry. This is your responsibility. We are a world of productivity. And if you can't handle it,
yes,
then you're going to fail.
Yep.
Instead of being like, oh, well, that's a lot, and like, and I think we are not wired to admit that we can't and to lean on something bigger.
Yeah.
And so I see how we can get into this cycle of just being self-determined, self-actualized to the 10th degree, that there is no space for God to work and for allowing us to trust that he's going to do what we are seeking from him.
Right. Or what he's put on our hearts.
And right.
That's, I think that's something that is a really hard balance to strike, because if you do feel convicted that you're doing work that is in your soul in some way, right? Like, I do believe that's from God, but you're doing it how you in this world see that it's going to work out, then, which is not always how it actually works out, you're kind of, you buy into your own narrative, and you're like, okay, this is what I have to do. This is what's in my soul, and this is how I'm going to go do it. And you can go 90 miles an hour with that tight control, without even looking left or right and zooming out and saying, I don't see the full picture, right? Like, I think of it as like, God, it's like little mice in a maze, and God's looking down on us, and we're like stuck in this one little area because we think we're going to get to the other side of the wall. And he's like, oh my gosh, you just have to go out and around. And like, he sees the full picture. And I also think I liked what you said about just the world and how that affects us, because it feels really weird, and you kind of feel like a loser when you take a step back and you're like, I actually don't care about this, or I know it's not that important, right? Because everyone, we have to live in this world. We're in this world, right? We have to operate within certain constraints. Yep. But and that's good, and that's reasonable. But there's like a balance you can strike of being in the world but not of it, And I think that whether it's, oh, I didn't do my kids' school agenda this week and put in our family shared calendar, which I didn't, obviously. I'm really giving that one up easily. I haven't thought about it every single day. Okay. But, whether it's something like that, or it's another one of my amazing failures this week, forgot to drop the drinks off for the class, like that. But just to release it and be like, oh man, I forgot that. Like, it's just not that big a deal. That is something I would have never done. And that's like a micro, that's not trusting God with the bigger picture. But I think when you do trust him with the bigger picture, the priorities of things the world demands of you get shuffled around, and you have a lot better perspective.
Well said. Yeah. Totally agree with that. I also think too, we, for me, trusting God, well, imagine a world where, like, if we were given something that we needed to resolve, right? Not necessarily something bad, but something to resolve. Imagine if we had the foresight and the ability, like, I know my natural go-to is to be like, okay, here's the plan. It's da 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 da. If you do this, this, and this, you'll get to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of you just and then you go,
Yeah.
like you said. Imagine if we had the ability to kind of slow down when we approach these things, like you said, pull out to that 40,000 foot view and say, here is what I need to accomplish. Here's what I can do. Here's what my inner circle of friends and family can do to support me to this accomplishment. Here's how God's going to play into this accomplishment. Here's how other members of my community are going to. Imagine if we looked at things from like a more communal perspective.
That's really interesting.
Like how much would it, what would our productivity be? Would it be greater? Would it be slower because we had to involve all these people? There's this whole mindset, and you hear it often in some of these catchphrases like too many cooks in the kitchen or da 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 da, too many hands in the pot. So that with the idea that we have too many people involved in something. Yeah. And so I think it's our natural inclination to rely on ourselves to get things done, especially if we want it done in a very particular way.
Yeah.
But imagine like some of the collaboration that we could have if we trusted, inner circle and God to participate in these goals that we had. And, what might have started as like a smaller goal could have turned into something much bigger.
Yeah.
And, I think it takes like really intentional thought to approach things in that way. And it's not my natural way of thinking, but just talking about this now got me to thinking like, oh, my next thing that I have, I'm going to try to like pull out a little bit and just expand the group that I'm including in this project, right? It's going to be a group project now.
Yeah.
And maybe that group's just me and God. Maybe that group's me, God, and my friends or whatever it is. Because
let them bring their talent and ability to whatever you're working on, or their gifts and their value,
And trusting not only God, but my community to help me with whatever it is.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because in school, when we're in elementary school, middle school, high school, we have group projects, right? And so it's this idea that, hey, the collaborative effort of brains is better than an individual's thought or brain. And I don't feel like outside of maybe professional settings where you have to collaborate in some sort of hierarchy, right, of business structure, I don't think we do that in our interpersonal lives.
Yeah.
Right. Like I don't think we're super inclined for group projects. And like I said, that group might just be you and God.
Yeah.
But kind of a fun twist of like bringing back something from when we were kids into our lives of like trying to do group projects and trusting other people's contribution to that project versus just trying to manhandle it on our own.
I think that's a really good perspective. And it's funny because I've always worked for myself. I started my first company while I was in college, worked for myself, that springboarded into my next thing. And it got more collaborative as my businesses grew, but it wasn't ever a traditional like corporate collaborative structure. And then for the last 5 years, I've been in tech, which I had a really great big team. But I was the CEO, so I still felt like the weight's on my shoulders, and I wasn't able to participate, I guess, in that. So that's something that I like, that perspective a lot. I guess I can try to apply it to my personal life. And the other thing I think that you said that's really relevant is that it might be a little slower. And I think that's something I've definitely learned as I'm trusting God. I want everything done in the next 5 days. Yeah. And that is why I would wake up and I would power so hard up and power so hard through, because I was meeting what I thought was a reasonable goal. And everybody in tech is, I love y'all. Y'all are crazy. Like tech bro mentality is real. There is nothing like this KPI speed driven ego world. And so it was like coming from like a more creative background, right. I had forgotten what living creatively and in a good pace was. And so over the last couple of months, as I've been, taking my hand off the wheel and off the gas pedal a little bit, it's been really nice to remember that tech space is not like actually real life,
right,
So I think if you're an entrepreneur, being able to take your hands off and trust God is really hard and really important. I think if you are able to shift out, have that perspective, spend some time in the Bible and really read these things that have been true for so long, you start to kind of incorporate it into your life and hopefully your work setting. What do you think? I know you just have a little bit more experience here, but is there a relevant way you could trust God in what those professional, like more collaborative settings are? Like not necessarily corporate, but you know, like
so
like how would you apply trusting God to
like what I do?
Yeah.
So beforehand, right? It was before a couple of months ago. It was my company was a small owner owned and operated. There were 4 of us that owned and operated a company, and myself and 3 orthopedic surgeons. And I was the primary decision maker, primary operations personnel, right? So I very much felt that, like, hey, if this business is going to succeed, it's because of what I'm doing, right? It's me taking the bull by the horns, making decisions, just getting stuff done, right? And so great, I've been doing this for 5 years with this company, and so it was, I would hire different team members onto the team as we grew and contracted and expanded, as needed. And I had employees that I had hired who it took me a few months, because at first I had support staff, but I didn't have like executive. Like not executive, but like kind of director level,
like middle, like between leadership and people that are doing the work.
Exactly, right? So I didn't have like sort of management people in place, and so as we grew, kind of acquired a couple of those, and it definitely took me a beat to relinquish a little bit of the need to feel like I had to manage everything on top, but that's what their job was, right? And so for me, that was a sort of a real world reckoning, in the sense that I trusted this person enough to hire them. I'm trusting them to do the job that they say they can do. Right. And I am not someone who blindly trusts. It takes a minute for me. Like, and I hate to say this.
Sometimes if you get burned, I was burned a couple of times, and
yes, I hate to say this, but for me, the proof is in the pudding. Right. So, like, if you show me that you're worthy of the trust, then great. I trust you. Right. And it's something you have to like spend years, doing this.
I do think that's really interesting though, because, and this is where I'm like, am I type A or am I type B?
There's AB. You might be AB.
I might be AB or probably BA, but this weird kind of space I operate within is I care a lot and I work hard and I want to control a lot. But like when I hire people, I'm like, great, you know what you're doing. Like I am just like almost like blindly and irresponsibly trustworthy, or not trusting. And I even do it with like my babysitters. Like they come over and I'm like some people, I'm like, oh right, I should probably like ask you where you live and have you had a background check. What I just am like a very in these things that are important, like kind of dumb in the way that I approach them, but then at the same time I'm not willing to give up that like ultimate trust to God. Like I'm like, I'm like, oh here, let me just throw this trust around, like again, like super irresponsibly, but I won't do the big work. Like I still think it's all on my I don't know if I do anymore, but that's in retrospect. Anyway.
So I hired team members who are manager level team members, and like I said, for me it was they needed, and I hate to say it, but they needed to prove to me that they could do the job in order for me to trust them, right? And I got to that point where I was like, that is more detrimental to the working relationship that I have with these people. And so I learned from that experience, and I was like, okay, if I trust them enough to hire them and to bring them on board and da 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 da, and this is where some of the disconnect happens. It's because, I am invested in this company. I
Right.
own part of this company. So like this company where an employee is just there for their paycheck, right? They don't have necessarily, and no matter how much they might get on board culturally, they are never going to be as invested as you are as an owner.
Yeah.
And
the skin in the game is a totally different
and it's
level.
so hard to create a culture for them to buy into it without actually owning it, right? So I see the appeal to employee-owned companies, right? The motivation there is great, right?
What are they called? ESOPs? Is that?
ESOP, yeah. So anyway, all to say, I learned a big lesson about trust in general on a human level. And I got to that point where I was like, okay, I learned to trust the people that I hired. I learned to trust my own judgment in hiring people. That was probably the first hurdle that I needed to get over, and then trusting that those people were going to do their job. So I learned to trust myself a little bit more, and I think that naturally segued into me being able to trust other people in my work environment circles. And then I remember being like, okay, I trust these theoretical strangers. Like, why would I not trust God to also take the reins? Someone who's never failed me.
Right.
Someone who, you read scripture and you can see that, there's a lot of times where trusting God is questioned, and he proves time after time that he's trustworthy. Yeah. And so I remember having sort of an epiphany moment of, oh, well, this, and just a switch went off in my head, and I was like, okay, well, from here forward, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
And so that was a change moment for me. And that was in the last 5-ish years. So I want to say maybe like 3.5 years ago, to be able to trust God's work in things that weren't necessarily spiritually oriented in my life.
So kind of like a bottom up approach, right?
Totally.
Like you're seeing it play out in real life, and then you're able to
apply the bigger. Yes, absolutely. And so that's how that played out for me in work specifically. I think I trusted God to hear my prayers, maybe not answer them all, but I know he's listening. Right. So I had this big trust in God. But then to invite him in to the parts of my life that are the big parts of my life, which are my family and my career and
it's hard not
my community. Yeah,
just hold on tight.
Right, exactly. This is my space, right? So I think once I got rid of that barrier, it was just, now it's just ingrained in my thought process and everything that I do. Whether it's, conflict at work. The first thing I do when I have conflict at work is I go to God and I say, hey, is it me? What am I doing here to
examine yourself first?
Right. And what do I need to do? And I understand this person's done me wrong, but I'm going to still pray for them. And because that's what we do. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had one employee who we really did not, someone I hired, I didn't want to necessarily hire this person, but my business partners did. So I said, okay. And lots of conflict there. But like I said, it could have been something. And there were days where I would go home and it would just eat at me because this individual's actions were just, I could not explain them. And so I was like, what is going on? So I really started to pray about it. And sure enough, praying about it, putting my trust in God to handle this, because I could not handle it, right? I had tried conflict resolution. I had tried mediation with HR.
You're doing all this stuff in this world.
Right. Yes, exactly. I'm doing all the earthly things that one is to do when you're in conflict in the work environment. And I didn't necessarily want to just fire the person, right? And so I started praying about it, and sure enough, it took a couple weeks, but just the consistent prayer of
giving it up.
Yes. Yeah. Because at a certain point I had to just say, okay, they're going to make the choices that they're going to make. And they weren't necessarily choices that were hurting the business. They were just odd personal choices that affected the interpersonal relationships.
I'm so curious. I know you can't.
I can't now, but I will tell you at some point.
Okay.
And so this person may listen to this one day.
Yeah.
And
What's
so
up?
out of respect for them, I'm not going to name names, but she'll definitely know who she is
Yeah.
when she hears this. And in case you ever wondered, I do still pray for you. And I do wish nothing but the best for her. She's
Yeah.
no longer with us,
Yeah.
but she left on her own accord.
That's great.
So I have a lot of peace about that when it was something that had really, I mean, it was like stressing me out to the point of wake me up at night.
Yeah.
And my poor husband was like, babe,
Yeah.
it's not that big of a deal. And I'm like, it's such a big deal. You know,
Yeah.
it had become such a deal to me because I was so confused
Yeah.
by it. And it was the first time in my life I'd ever experienced an adult relationship like this that was just sort of strife with confusion and conflict for no apparent reason.
Right. And
so,
that you're forced to interact with because it is your
right.
livelihood, your career.
Yes.
Like,
and
it's not like you can, okay, I have this with a couple of, our PTA,
right.
people at school
Yes.
are, I'm like, I just don't get this, but you know what? I can peace out. Like,
Right,
you can't peace out if
exactly.
it's a situation like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, it wasn't warranted for like firing her,
Mhm.
right? Because like these two worlds can exist. Someone can be good at their job and you cannot get along with them.
Yeah.
Right. And those can coincide in
Yeah.
a work environment.
Yeah.
And we're a small company, so it's more obvious.
Yeah.
But anyway, lots of grace was given, I'm sure, both ways. You know, I'm sure that I was not my
She's
best
on a
self
podcast
always.
right now, like, ugh, that boss I used to
Yeah,
have.
Sarah's like, God, this girl. So, you know, no blame there for the relationship troubles, but
It was a tricky situation.
It was a tricky situation. I put my trust in God to help me through it, and sure enough, I mean, it worked. It like
Yeah.
legit gave me peace about what was going on. It made me feel like, okay, I have done what I can. Now the rest is up to God, and this person's life is going to play out, however, and
Yeah.
God will hopefully bless them with a great life.
I'm gonna go do that tonight and start praying about something I
Yes.
need. See what happens in a couple weeks. I seem to be on the year-long plan. God, if you could like hurry that up, that'd be cool.
I will say this: like once you do that, once you surrender a little bit of trust and control to
Mhm.
God, and you get positive affirmation that it
Mhm.
works. I mean, it sort of is self-fulfilling momentum
Yeah.
to
Do it
keep
again. Do it again.
doing it.
Yeah.
Yes. So like small things, big things, in
Yeah.
between things.
I think also this is the verse I found in my grandma's Bible, Romans, and at the end of it, it kind of covers everything. It's like, you're a part of the body, and you need to like be fervent in your spirit, and all. It's like all these good things, and then the end part is, and do not seek revenge on your enemies. God will do it for you.
Yes.
And revenge doesn't necessarily mean like they get struck by lightning and die, right? It means she left on her own accord. Like God has ways of handling the situations for us, and it's right there in the end. And revenge sounds like very savage.
Resolution.
Yeah, resolution. But it is a great reminder to like not only trust him, but he's got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And there was a very distinct moment where I was like, okay, I feel at peace about this whole thing. And because I was trusting that the resolution would play out in a Christ-like way.
Yeah.
Right. Because I wasn't wishing ill on anybody, right? No matter how much I felt like
doing
they
it.
might have deserved it.
Yeah. I wanted to wish you ill.
Yes, right. But I knew that God proved to me that he had my back.
Yeah.
And had her back too. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like you said, she's not like she got struck by lightning or anything like that. But like you said, she left on her own accord. So she left amicably. It was, she did her job until she left, and it was the right time for us to pivot anyway.
Yeah.
So God is up there orchestrating things in the interest of multiple parties, right? And that's the other thing too, is like, I don't believe that it worked out for me
is like,
because it didn't work out for her. You know what I mean? It's not like like I said, my conflict was resolved at the expense of her. No, like, she was moving on to something else that was better for her.
I think that's what happens because we can't see that. We can't zoom out and see that bigger picture. The pieces he's moving around are going to work out for the better for everyone.
Totally.
And what that is, like, our life is what we obviously live. So we're hyper focused on it. It feels the most real. But why we are living is because we're all a part of this bigger plan and purpose that he has that we do not know, we cannot know. So him giving him license to do his work ends up benefiting not only your life in a positive way, but hers. And ripple effect, we don't even know all the other pieces that were changed because of this trust that you put in God instead of, trying to hold on so tightly and make it work here and now for you. Right. I think something this just popped into my head. I was talking to my brother yesterday. He's like, I can just see so clearly, like, what's going to happen next. I'm so excited. I can see this thing I'm going to publish, and I see it and I feel it. And like, I know that's why it's real and it's happening. And I was like, okay, the last time I did that with Afloat, I wasn't trusting God though, but I fully had like bought in to my vision on something, and it didn't work out. Right. Like, so I think that's a good example of, being able to apply it to not small things, but daily life, and making sure you're checking in with God. Then you don't get 5,000 miles down the road in the wrong direction, so sure of your vision, because it resonated with something that God still has inside me. I was pretty sure that was the road I was supposed to go on. I could see it, I could feel it. I would say I would put all my trust in God that it would work out, but I didn't put my trust in God, and it didn't work out. Like, I was trusting something, and I don't know, myself, duh. Not fail. But I think that, like, that's it wasn't that he failed me. It was that I was so unwilling to zoom out and do those little things every day, looking at what reality was and trusting him with those things, put me on planet wherever I landed, thinking I knew what I was doing. So I think there's a really nice message in everything you said, and that it might feel kind of like simple steps that are taking you towards a bigger picture, because if you think he's failed you, when you really take a step back, and now in retrospect looking at it, I'm like, he didn't fail me. I was the one that was out there like coming up with all this, like a freaking schizophrenic person, really. Like, if you think about it, like, what reality was I living in? So yeah, I also really, I do think it's awesome to be able to look back, you said it, at the Bible and find people that trusted him, and he continued to show up. Like David.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, he got that blessing from God when he was 15 that he was going to be king.
One day.
And then, one day, right? Yeah. And then he had to wait 15 years for it to come to fruition. But instead of doing what I did, which was, okay, great, here's my road, here's my path, here's my plan.
You say 15, let's see if we can do it in 5.
Literally, yes. Like 5 days, I mean. Because it's tech. But no, like, that's just so cool. And I know, we were talking about at Cornerstone last week, is he had the opportunity, even like came to him, like if Saul finds him or doesn't find him, he finds himself in the cave with Saul, who's been trying to kill him for like all these years, and Saul is king. And instead of taking the opportunity to kill him, which his men were like, yeah, let's go, this is it, he was like, this isn't my time. And he literally like surrendered it to God, didn't take things into his own hands like Moses did when he killed the guard, however many years before, which didn't work out. So David does the opposite and, keeps progressing. Obviously he had some, faults later on, but I think that's really cool. And you really can read Psalms and understand what's inside of him while he's going through all this. He talks to God very honestly. Why are you doing this? But I trust you. I love you. You're my savior. Lord God Almighty is fighting for me. It doesn't mean he doesn't struggle in the middle, but that message I think is so strong, and you really see him walking it out. And and then, I think Jesus is another obviously perfect example of it. Like, he knew what was his destiny and what was planted in his heart. And did he want to do it? Probably didn't. Like, I personally can't get excited about being beaten and crucified. And,
hold nails in the hands.
Not for no. But like, he fully, obviously, David was not God, Jesus, is part of that Godhead. And so I know they're not the same, but I think it's reflective in these stories that show you there is something to trust, and he works it all out for a much bigger, better plan.
Cut.
All right. Hey, that was like really fun.
I know.
Oh, my legs. I know.